Welcome to another episode of Me and ADHD Podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Nathyn in a discussion about the journey so far and also what the next step is. So a big welcome to Nathyn. How you doing?
Hey Darren, how you doing? Thanks so much for having me. Really been looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's like deja vu, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Right. I mean, we've been talking and about our journeys and everything, and yours is very different to a lot of people I've spoken to, and to mine as well. So how has this affected you, and tell us about it basically?
Um, I take it you kind of hitting on my route to getting my diagnosis and that. So
Yeah.
basically pretty common one in some ways was I was diagnosed originally as a child, a little bit non-normal, should I say. I was diagnosed in a third world country by the military. We didn't yet have diagnosis routes through the normal kind of medical channels at the time. Plus, my father was in the military, so yeah, very strange. Late 80s, early 90s. Second grade of schooling. Your parents get told, your child's learning difficulties potentially. Something that wasn't really heard of around those times, and that especially in South Africa, where I'm from originally. And so praise really has to be given to my parents, instead of just being, what would we say, the normal kind of closed off, closed-minded type of thing. My child's fine, he's going to be whatever. And that they actually went out looking for help. They tried to find, the best routes for it and that. Like I say, this resulted in me getting a diagnosis of, back then, ADD originally, as well as then getting put into I'm trying to think of an appropriate word, a special school of sorts,
Yeah.
where, we were kind of all clumped together, whether you had neurodivergence, whether you were cerebral palsy, whether you had Down syndrome, whether you were autistic, whether you were quadriplegic, we were all kind of lumped together in the same place and things. And that doesn't sound too kosher, but at the same time, I think that school is still operating till today.
Oh, right.
At the same time, the only options back then were on medication was Ritalin. It was the big, well-known, option and things like that. But we kind of all had the same medication, the same dosage, one size fits all. And yeah, you can imagine, what that kind of looked like in a bunch of children, that had never been on something as such and that.
Yeah.
And then naturally the normal school day would kind of complete, or the schooling that we were at, and from there I would go into what they would call occupational health therapies for a couple of hours, where I'd be in little white rooms doing everything from pattern recognition, handwriting, a bunch of other things, and which then results in, I think I did aptitude tests or something similar every single day, which then resulted in the age-old Mr. and Mrs. Kerchhoff, your son is about genius level, but he's never going to be able to use it. He's basically broken. Which then started the whole journey of narratives.
Right. Okay.
So that was the original diagnosis for myself. But then, later in life and that, I went to look at re-diagnosis because it's something I get in from. But that's a whole different story with the NHS. And
Right. Okay. So that's quite a journey, obviously from South Africa, then coming over to here. There are some things like in the school that you mentioned about the occupational therapy and the testing and stuff at school, which I don't know what they did or all the reasons behind why they did it, but it's kind of, I wish we had that kind of thing over here as well in the schools. Maybe for a different reason or done in a different way. Don't get me wrong, but the help in the school during school as well. That kind of thing would be good. But hey, let's just try and get into a school to begin with, I think.
I agree wholeheartedly with you. I mean, I think in some ways, let's be real, schooling hasn't come on in a lot of ways. It's still very much the old kind of factory line of schooling at one size fits all and things. You're all
Agreed.
expected to do great in everything, make a fish climb a tree, basically. Um, but then, in some ways, I know, from dealing with other ND parents and people like yourself and things and that there is support, and there are options and that. And unfortunately, it still very much falls between kind of the teacher being the gatekeeper to some of these, and what type of teacher you get. So it's a consistency issue at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, I have another friend and I who suspected her child was, somewhere on the spectrum around ADHD and things. But the teachers deemed them non-severe enough. So they won't action any paperwork and had to be able to get them, through to be able to do their assessments and stuff like that. And it's like, well, what categorizes severe enough when you could be helping a child learn the correct, or not correct, but learn coping mechanisms that might be able to better their life down the road for
Yeah.
themselves or help them navigate, Um, the worst thing in the world is having a child sitting there, whether they have a label or not, wondering if they're broke, right? Starting that narrative off early is one of the most detrimental kind of routes that you could do. So I like to speak of my own journey. I don't really tend to try to narrate other people's journeys for them and things like that. So one of the things you hear me speak a lot about is narratives, right? It's
Yeah.
something I had to teach myself about at some point as well. And, one of the worst things we end up doing as ourselves is at some point you eventually stop fighting narratives and you embed them and you start to believe them yourself, right? Um, and this is one of the biggest things I think later on in life, that once we get diagnosed or we get the label or, we just do therapies and things like that. It's one of the hardest things I think is learning to forgive yourself for believing the narratives,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It sounds super simple and that, right? Just because that was true then or just because that was something I experienced then, it doesn't make it true today.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And just because somebody else or the whole community base of stigma and bias and things that has like imprinted that on it, doesn't mean it's true. Right? I try to lead now, and it's an annoying factor between my friends. But whenever one of them pops up with a, "Hey, I think I'm so and so," "Oh no, I might be whatever," it's like, well, what's the definition of an individual? Definition of an individual is someone who thinks uniquely for themselves and can just be themselves and things like that. It's the similar definition in neurodiverse, thinking uniquely, thinking differently, and seeing differently and things like that, right? So why can't we just be embraced as such rather than getting a label, but then being told you're broken or you're not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, or it's going to be whatever, right? Why don't we try to not look at superpowers? I know this is a very triggering terminology for a lot of people and things and that. Not look at kind of the gifts and things and that. But why don't we treat the person as an individual? And we start to kind of look at both sides of the spectrum for that individual and look at sort of where their skill sets lie or where their hurdles lie and things and that, and then try and put them in places of strength rather than putting them in places of mundanity or complacency or, places where, yeah, you'll be all right in the corner over there and things just doing this and that. Why don't we try and kind of learn the person?
Yeah.
But yeah, but when it comes to schooling, I don't have a pet peeve with it enough. I think you get great teachers at times that have their hands tied by red tape,
Yeah.
by budgets,
Yeah.
etc., and things and that.
Definitely.
And by that age-old saying of, you know, that's the way we've always done it, which kills me, But there are schools, they're obviously, I'm no promoter of schooling in or specific schools as such and that, but I know a couple of people close to me and that have their kids in things like the Montessori type of schools where it's very much driven by the child, what they learn, when they learn it, and how they learn it and stuff. And that sounds great if you got, money to burn, but when you're kind of in that normal working class and that, we're kind of limited in regards to where can we send our children, what can we do, and, what resources are available to them. especially if you start to then look at the NHS for, help and stuff and that, that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, no, very true. Very true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's yeah, when that kind of, as you say, narrative is there right from the very start, and it's negative, it's very hard to sort of break that and come out and actually try to really understand yourself and see the positives in yourself as a person, and go after your dreams and not being tied into the I've always been held back because of this, and this. Well, actually, I can do this, and this. It might be different to what they want, but it's something that I actually enjoy doing. I like doing. I can do. So yeah, go out and get it. But I mean, for gone.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I totally agree with you in that regards. And that, I mean, it's difficult, depending on the journey or where you are in your journey after diagnosis, or whether you just kind of decide one day, hey, look, these traits kind of equal up to, and I believe I am. That the start of that journey, the middle of that journey, there's never an end to that journey of self, self-learning and who am I, and where do I fit into this big orb of a place that we live in and things and that, right? And so it shouldn't be, right? Because we're always evolving, we're always kind of adapting and things like that. And I think that word adapting is probably one of the biggest ones for me, because ask anybody pre 50 years old, right? I hit it in the hospitality industry as a career from the age of like 17. I was a chef, working my way through. I got to work in some amazing places. I got to work in the UK as well as a chef for a time being in that. Great place for ADHDs, right? Chaos hits the proverbial fan, and it becomes like a symphony for us, right? Because then, the chaos and the time and that kind of matches up to the speed our heads move in, and we just flow and we go. Whilst everyone else is running around like chickens without heads and thinking so that, we're just kind of floating, and this is great, right? Everything just kind of matches up. Take a person out of that environment and put them into a corporate environment where there is its own pressures, but it's much slower.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, oh, damn, what am I doing here? Right. And if I kind of look throughout my life at sort of times where I've thought of not being able to trust my head to, whether it be academics, whether it be jobs, whether it be whatever kind of situation and things, and it's like, hang on, but I still made it through those. Right.
Yeah.
I've still made it to where I am today and things, but how the heck did I do that? Right. I've got no papers behind my name as in qualifications or, doctorates or PhDs or anything as such, right? And I've been blessed to work with some, amazing people throughout my life and things, as well as, get to see and experience some amazing things. And it's like, but how did I get through all those types of situations? Did I just blag it? Did I just kind of like make it to like break it? Or if it goes the other way around, I'm sure. But yeah, and whilst we're not talking about superpowers or gifts and that, I had to be kind to myself at some point and say, hey, maybe that's one of my things. Maybe that's one of my ADHD things there, right? Be able to see something and not adapt a little bit to it, and not enough to be able to actually kind of do something with it and make something of it, right? But at the same time, I think not having those same kind of, what's the word? Justifications like qualifications and things like that, imprinted something else on me, which is imposter syndrome. I mean, I spent 10 years in corporate life eventually, right? And I waited every day for them to knock on my desk and say, hey, sorry, we made a mistake. Do you mind walking out? I'm not gonna lie, it was one of my biggest things in it, and it caused anxiety and stresses and things in it every day. No one did it. No one ever kind of came and did that to me, and or said like, hey, you shouldn't be or anything like that. But that was my own bias towards my head, my own bias towards, my capabilities and my strengths and things like that, because I was blessed. I went from chefing, catering and things, a bit of retail and that, into the corporate world, and from answering phones into tech, and whilst in tech and that, no qualifications, I got to work with some, super smart, intelligent individuals, and I still had a place there where I was heard, and I was able to offer insights that nobody else could offer, or routes that nobody else could see, or things that people would normally be really challenged with, and I'd be able to like, oh well, why don't we just and it's like, then you sit back at home and it's like, how did I do that?
Yeah.
But then the age-old conundrum of, I'm not the first one to raise my hand when I think I've got the answer, because in my head I'm like, well, I can't know this. I there's no way I have an answer for this. And then you keep quiet, and then all of a sudden, someone half an hour later or 2 days later says, "Hey, but what about?" And you're like, "Ugh."
Yeah.
Right?
Only I can
Right?
speak
And
up.
it's like, yeah, but we don't. And this is one of the biggest things. That was one of the biggest drivers for me to start kind of doing the work I was doing with neurodiversity within the corporate workspace and things. That was how many people are sitting in that kind of position.
Yeah.
Really mundane, complacent kind of jobs, and or kind of forgotten about, and that because they don't feel they have a voice, or they don't feel they have a place that to be able to share what's going on in their head, because they don't have a piece of paper behind them to say, hey, yes, okay, you're smart enough to be able to add to this conversation or whatever. And
Yeah.
it sounds like something so silly and so stupid, but how impacting, how jarring, how life-changing, and that is that imposter syndrome and around our own, abilities and things that. And worst of all, if you've come from a life or journey where you've not experienced a lot of praise, or you've not experienced a lot of positions of, hey, here's a trophy, or, whatever, and things and that, you can't blame the person for not knowing how to speak up. You can't blame the person for not knowing how to champion themselves and that. But unfortunately, a lot of work models or working models and that aren't based on kind of proactive performance reviewing and things, and that they're based more on reactive as to how the person champions themselves, which is a whole other kettle of fish that we can get into at some point. But yeah,
Yeah.
to touch base on the schooling thing again, and I think there's still a lot more that needs to be done for children.
Oh, absolutely.
I think the younger we can kind of, and I don't just mean diagnose, I don't just mean ND, I don't just mean NT, across the board, we could be doing more in a resource kind of way for children, for safe journeys, safe pathings, and safe kind of routes forward, and it all starts the same in the workplace with communication. Just getting to actually know the individual, just getting to know the children, getting to know your colleagues, your employees, your peers, and things like that, and understanding the individual. I think that's where you can tell the difference between a really invested teacher and someone that gets a paycheck. The same as the difference between a manager and a leader. At the end of the day, and things like that, is that investment in their people, schooling, workplace, etc. Because let's be real, schooling is very much like the workplace these days, isn't it? Or always has been.
Yeah.
The same kind of hierarchical
Yeah.
situations and things like that. And yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I've got on a little bit of a rant there. I apologize.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're right. You're right. Yeah, it is a very much do as I say, not as I do kind of thing at school, and it's everyone's kept in one box. There you go. This is how we teach. This is what's expected. And neurotypical, neurodiverse doesn't really matter. Everyone is very different. Even as you get 10 neurotypical people in a class, and there are some of them who are still going to be able to actually learn better doing. There's going to be people who are going to be to learn better by reading or by listening, and some are more practical, some are more it's very, everyone is very different, but we always put them into, well, schools always put them into the same box. We're going to do it this way, this is how we're going to show you, this is what you're going to do, um, and they don't get to explore who they are, which is a
I
shame.
agree wholeheartedly. I agree. I think so. One of the things I learned very late in life that's okay is it's okay just to be an ideas person. Just because you're the ideas person doesn't mean you have to be the doer. Doesn't mean you have to
Absolutely.
be the one taking the action. Sounds so simple, right? It sounds so whatever, especially when you're children, right? Because when you're a child, especially with minds like ours and things that where you're crowded with ideas and concepts and whatever and things, and mud cakes that can maybe fly or something, all the weirdness that comes along with things, and right? But along my journey, there was a point where I stopped trying to have ideas. I stopped believing in my ideas. I stopped believing in the way my head works, and I believed the narratives. I put it away. And working in corporate, sort of in the tech side of things, and I didn't believe there was a place to share ideas or concepts and that because I didn't know the working out of the idea.
Yeah.
I knew that there was something, but I didn't know how to get to the end point with it. Or I could see the end point of it, but I couldn't tell you the starting point of it, for example. And one of my very good friends, and I just caught up with him the other day. I had a nice coffee with him and things and that. One day I think he saw me struggling, or I don't know, soundboarding with him or something, and I was a bit frustrated, and I turned around and I was like, I don't understand with this idea. I can't figure out how to do it though, and I don't know how to take it to like the leaders, or I don't know how to take it to the thing because I don't know the workings out. I don't know I can see the risks, I can see the pitfalls in it, but I don't know how to get started. He's like, but that's okay, man. That's what teams are about. That's what groups of people are about, right?
Yeah.
Because we can put together an ideas person, we can put together a doer, we can put together a this and a that. Sometimes it's okay just to be the person at the top, and that can see the whole overview of the thing, and not actually know the finite detail, or the low level detail and things. And that. You don't have to kind of know all of it just to be able to sell an idea, or to be able to share an idea, you know, and I mean, I must have been 35 at the time or something as such, and this to me was revolutionary, right? It sounds so stupid and so simple and things and that, but you know, I think it goes back to like maths class, right? When I was a tot and things and that, and it's like, okay, I can see the answer, I can tell them the answers, I do, and then I get in trouble for cheating because I can't tell them how I work it out. So I stopped doing maths
Yeah.
because what's the point if I'm just going to be in trouble all the time, right? There's no point. And if I can't tell them how I work it out or how I see it, it's like, oh, I must be wrong. Okay, just won't do maths anymore. Stay away from it. Hide from it. You know, and it's. I think that whole kind of equation is a life equation of where most of us sit. You know,
Yeah.
things that impacted us children will always have a later consequence in life and that to us, and things like trauma and everything else, right? We can get into the RSDs and we can get into the PTSDs and the CPTSDs and things like that, right? Whole nother podcast. But those kind of things, I think it's pertinent in the sense that just because it's true back then doesn't make it true today. And that can be a second ago, that can be a minute ago, that can be a day ago, that can be a year ago, that can be 10 years, 20, 30 years ago. It doesn't make it true today, right? Would we like the world to be much further along with the concept of neurodiversity?
Absolutely.
Yes, 100%, right? And I think we're on a bit of a precipice at the moment with communities like the ones that we're part of in it, i.e. with TikTok and Discord and things like that, where we're talking more,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, we're talking a lot more with regards inside the community and that, which is great. Do I think we need to, exude that communication and that knowledge and stuff out into the wider communities and things like that? 100%.
Yeah.
I think we still very much silo that information and we keep a lot of that within the community rather than sharing it out as far as we do. But who can blame us with the stigmas that are attached to these things, or the age old, just another ADHD, a procrastinator. They're just lazy, making excuses and that, right? What's the difficulty with ADHD, man? Just pop an Adderall, go for it, right? And these are things we've lived with. And I mean, that's a bias I still live with when I talk to someone about my ADHD till today. Is as soon as I say, oh, if we're going to work together or something, I'll be like, I'll do a bit of signposting and I'll be like, hi, I'm Nate. We're going to be working together on this project and things like that. Now, I am ADHD. I'm a combined ADHD to be exact and things. I work a little bit differently. I see things a little bit differently and that. But I welcome you to come and sit and talk to me. And that anytime you have a question or you're wondering why I'm doing something a little bit different or something as such, right? Sounds easy. It's not that easy enough. It feels like you're on a ledge every time you
Yeah.
do it. Is someone going to laugh at you? Is someone going to whatever and things and that? But in the back of my head, I'm going, this person is probably just rolling their eyes at me, thinking, oh, he's just making an excuse by calling himself an ADHD. He's probably just lazy, procrastinates. It just means he's away with fairies. He's not going to give us all his productivity time, blah, 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 blah. And that's my own bias. That's my own head telling me that about myself, right? That person sitting across from me could be 100% engaged and like, oh, crikey, okay, cool, yeah, I'd love to learn more about ADHD. Let's go, right?
Yeah. That little thing on your
It just
shoulder.
shows you the narratives. Yeah, yeah, the monkey on the shoulders.
It's
Yeah, it's a great,
just
it's
whispering in your
a good book
ear.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do need to talk more, and, sort of going forward and how to tackle this, support this, understand this more. We do need to talk to more people who are not in the same community, be it your work colleagues, families, friends. You need to be open, but at the same time, I mean, everyone who's got family, friends, and work colleagues and bosses, they'll understand what they're like. They'll know if their boss is going to be open to a conversation. They know if their family are open or very closed off to a conversation about that. But this is where I think, we've talked before about it works both ways. We need to be able to chat about it, but the people who need to listen need to be open as well, and provide that environment for the ADHD or whoever to be comfortable talking about it. So it's something that it needs a lot of work, but it needs work on both sides.
I 100% agree with you, and that's probably one of the biggest things in that for me is, you know, so like I say, I've been blessed, whilst working in corporate to, start a couple of movements around neurodiversity, as well as diversity and inclusion as a whole. I got the opportunity to sit on, the board of diversity and inclusion within corporate industry I was working in. I got to start up some working groups and around neurodiversity, meet some amazing people, and that, put some real actions in place, working through HR policies, as well as, kind of creating some safer journeys and more inclusive journeys, sorry, for neurodiverse people and that.
Yeah.
And once coming out of corporate, sort of the middle of last year, and that, working now privately for myself, consulting in the space, that one of the questions that I found asked the most when dealing with sort of employers or job creators and things like that, is how do we even start the conversation? Which is a fair question,
Yeah.
right? Because it's shocking to me that, we can scream about diversity, inclusion, we can talk about LGBTQ plus communities, we can talk about race, we can talk about menopause and things, and all these things have a place and a relevance in that, right? But one of the topics that's still barely communicated about is neurodiversity, right? You can go on LinkedIn now and look at any kind of call to action around diversity inclusion, and neurodiversity is hardly ever mentioned. And to my head, it frustrates me because it's not a hard equation. So I put the question up, and I asked the question, and why, which is a very typical thing for me. My friends will tell you that I'm annoying with my whys, but it's the way my head works, right? And yeah, and the overwhelming response was, we don't even know how to start the conversation, to be honest, in the sense of, how do we not make the person feel, what's the word? Uncomfortable, I think,
Yeah.
was the term used there. But then also on the other side, liability, as a company and things, and that, what's going to happen if I walk up to this person and I say, hey, I've noticed that you work a little bit differently, and have you considered, are you, you know, what is the wording? What is the term? What is the right way of approaching these things? And and it kind of amplified the fact that unfortunately, at this moment in time, there's still an ownership on us and our community to kind of have to take the first step.
Yeah.
Which by no means is easy, which by no means doesn't have its own hurdles and complications and whatever other terminology you want to use around difficulty in that, it would be well placed, right? Because, it's not an easy topic to approach from either side of that aisle, right? Because what kind of response are you going to get? What kind of impact is it going to be now that I've declared I'm ADHD? I mean, all you have to do is go onto the NHS website and type in, ADHD, and they have a definition of what ADHD is. I would never hire an ADHD based on that definition in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm combined ADHD, so I'm on both sides of the spectrum of ADHD. So it's like, and that's our NHS, right? Now imagine you're an HR policy advisor or an HR policy, facilitator and things like that, and you've got to build a policy around neurodiversity and ADHD is autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, etc., and you go with that, which you wouldn't be wrong to do because that's the NHS, right? That's our medical body. That's who looks after us when we're in trouble, right? It would be scary. So, and now you're a manager, right? Not even a leader. Now you're a manager, and one of your colleagues has taken the very brave step to say, "Hey, I'm ADHD," or "Hey, I'm autistic," or "Hey, I'm dyspraxic," and the manager like, "Okay, I don't know what to do with this. Give me a second," and they go on the intraweb. And they're like, okay, cool, HR policy number 666, whatever, right? But, right, neurodiversity. Oh, wait, it's not even under neurodiversity, it's under mental health, first and foremost, right? ADHD, click. Eyes go, right? Because policy is law, which is the first wrong step. Policy is guidance. Policy is, this is a foundation for us to start to be able to explore the individual.
Yeah.
Policy is not law. Policy is not, the be all and the end all, which is a whole nother kettle of fish and like a bug of mine. But anyway, and you as a manager, you read that policy and you're like, oh crap. I'm trying to be nice with my wording. Oh crap. I've got one of them in my team. What do I do? Where do they go? What do they do? Right? So if you think about it, if you approach a GP, right, in your first steps of diagnosis and things, and right, and this is going to make a complete understanding in a second, right? Someone you're supposed to be able to trust, someone you're supposed to be able to say you be safe with, right? Someone you're supposed to be able to go to about anything that's going on with your body, your mind, your head, whatever, and things like that, right? If you go to a GP and you say, I think I'm ADHD, and they laugh at you, or worse, they tell you, yeah, but you're over 18. Haven't you grown out of it? Or you feel dismissed in whatever way, or you get the rolled eyes kind of thing, or whatever, right? That's someone you're supposed to be guaranteed to be safe with.
Yeah.
Irrespective of race, creed, whatever, and things and that, right? Age, whatever, and that. That's someone you're guaranteed to be safe with. Why would you want to tell a boss? Why would you want to tell an employer? Why would you want to tell your peers, your colleagues, or anybody, right? It's a hurdle that not a lot of people, not a lot of neurodiverse people want to approach from that perspective and that, right? But this is the difference, again, between management and leadership, right? To me, a leader is someone that makes the time to actually invest in their people. A leader is someone that actually takes the time and that to know their people, know their strengths, know their weaknesses, know all their things, wants them to go far surpass them as their leader and things that they want them in a place and that they're going to do it because they understand that if I look after my people are going to look after me and my company, my goals, my whatever, right? Now, I don't mean that you have to have a title of leader to be a leader, right? You don't have to have a title of manager to be a manager, etc. Things, right? Leadership is a quality. Being a leader is a quality, right? I've met people at management level that were more leaders than CEOs of companies, and in my opinion, and things and that, right?
Yeah.
And then I've met leaders that are more like managers in a lot of ways that I'd never want to be led by. So when it comes to this and that, it's about creating a safe place first for a person to feel safe enough to be able to open up to and to share. And then let's be real. If I may be so bold, if I may be so rude to asking that, do you want to remind everybody how old you were when you got your diagnosis, Darren?
I was 51 then.
So that's a lot of working years before knowing officially.
Yeah.
Right? Right. Now, a lot of workplaces still today, and well, let's be nice. A lot of workplaces offer reasonable adjustments and, accommodations and things like that, right? Unfortunately, a lot of those same workplaces will only do so when it comes to neurodiversity if you have an official diagnosis.
Correct.
Right? Now, how many of us are sitting there without an official diagnosis and things like that, right? Because you're sitting on a 5-year wait list. Let's be generous with NHS. You're sitting on a 3-year wait list for a diagnosis, right? But you first got to get through a GP. You first got to find a GP that's going to be like, and the gold standard of GP for this is someone that turns around and says, Nate, I don't know anything about this, but hey, tell me what you need and I'll find the person you need to get to. That's the gold standard, right? Because we can't even expect someone to turn around as a GP and say, okay, cool. So ADHD, I have a basic understanding of things and I see how this works and that. Right, I know the direct route in that for this, blah, 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 blah. Done, let's go. Right? That's like fairy tale stuff. That's like that mythical unicorn that we're waiting to come out of the darkness and say, hey, we found the leprechaun on the gold part of the rainbow. Let's go. Right? So, when it comes to workplace and talking about this type of stuff, and I think it puts a lot of us back in that same spot as children, if you were lucky to get a childhood diagnosis, where these kind of conversations came up more than not, around, why is your child like this? Why are you like that? You might not have had the place to be able to talk about neurodiversity and things like that. Like I said, I was very blessed in the sense that my parents went out and looked, for what this was, what this looked like, and they got me a lot of assistance in that at first and things with regards to my ADHD and my neurodiversity and stuff and things. I feel kind of bad at one point, when the people turned around and they gave them that kind of final diagnosis of, yes, his IQ is above super level, super genius, but he's never going to be able to use it. Because it kind of put an expectation in their head, and this is going to sound awful and things, and I don't mean it that way at all and that, but, one of my father's motivating things for me was, hey, you've got a super IQ, you can do this. Sounds great. It used to break me every time. Because I could never meet that. I could never, I felt like I let my father down, every other day of the week, when it came to these things, because I couldn't tap into it. I could see the weird stuff, no problem, but I couldn't hack like the normal stuff that everybody else was doing, in no way, shape, or form. And that wasn't on my father, that wasn't on my mother, and you touched on it earlier, right? Safe places to be able to have these type of conversations with parents and family and stuff like that. How many of us have tried to approach these conversations with our parents, right? I've tried to do the same with my own family and stuff and that, and I was surprised to find, that there's moments where they feel a massive guilt around it, which then kind of stops the conversation. But in no way do I blame them for being neurodiverse. In no way do I blame them for genetics, because no offense, this was passed to them, potentially passed to me.
Absolutely.
It's heritage, right?
Yeah.
In a way that, if nothing else, it'd just be great to be able to sit down and talk about it and have a giggle and have a, hey, so what does that look like for you? Right? Because my father got a late diagnosis of dyslexia eventually and things like that as well. but there's still that stigma attached to it. Oh, I must have broken my child by giving them or something as such and things like that. And we need to kind of get to a place where we move away from this broke mentality, or this broken mentality and things, and that, right? Being broken, two different things. But yeah, so I think those type of conversations having maybe not taken place as much as in childhood or those kind of spaces where neurodiversity was spoken about. I mean, you and I come from very different generations to most, and we're a little bit up there compared to a lot of people. Um, where there was still those expectations, you just kind of throw mud on it and you carry on going. Right?
Yeah.
You don't stop, right? You don't talk. And I mean, one of the ways my neurodiversity comes across, I was always laughed at, kind of in a way, because I'm the emotional one, right? In the family and things and that, right? I'm the one that's too much in his feels and stuff and that, and I hold my hand up to it, right? I have a hyperactivity of my emotions, and but I have a what is the correct terminology these days? It changes every other day. Uh, I'm an extreme empathetic emotional dysregulation thing in it. So I very much feel what people tell me. I very much feel the things I see in my head, which is great in a lot of ways and great in dealing with people sometimes, but you carry a lot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not so great for those things that might have been triggering or hurtful as a child or whatever, and things, if it keeps going in a loop and that, right, you relive those moments and that pain and stuff and that over and over, right? But at the same time, it really helps when getting to know people or being in social kind of situations and where someone just needs someone's shoulder, right? But at the same time, that brings up that whole conundrum of introvert, extrovert, right? Because I fall on both sides of that spectrum. I love being around people, but also hate being around people. So, yeah. But bringing it back to workplace, schools, how do we go about it? How do we do it? And we might not have been taught it the best way when we're younger, but it all boils down to communication. Starting a conversation, as challenging, as difficult, as whatever you want to use, it starts with a conversation, right? And some of us think we're the best at conversing. I can tell you now, we're not. We're really not. None of us are. It's one of those skill sets that has to be continually learned and improved on and updated and upgraded and things like that, right? And when we think we've done enough, do a little bit more, right? And we might not always see the fruits of our labor from the conversations we're having now, but just think maybe just down the line, you might be creating a safe journey for somebody else that comes along after you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's the big one, right? It's not always about the here and now and that. It's about, okay, what's it going to look like down the line, especially when you're parents or, you're in positions of power and things. And then it's like, okay, what can we do in that to help ensure our people have a safe journey with us while they're with us? What can we do? What can that look like? And all it is conversation. It's not that complex. It's not that difficult.
I talk to on the podcast for two reasons. Well, one, the initial reason is therapy for me. Once I got my diagnosis and I found the words, I had a voice, which I'd never had before. Talking about it really helped me. But then when I started speaking to other people, because I started off just talking to nothing, it was just audio to begin with, and just me. But talking to people like yourself and other guests I've had on, I've learned that I enjoy the educational part of it for me. Hearing other people's experiences and thoughts behind it all helps me to understand everything as well. As much as I do quite a bit of research and all that, and to find out about myself, speaking to people and listening to their stories is just as insightful and just as helpful um, to me. And I'm not a talker. I'm not. So doing podcasts is really weird for me because my ADHD is your. I guess as they're saying that the typical female variety which gets missed because I'm not overly hyperactive. It's all here, very inattentive. Um, and that's why a lot of ladies are getting diagnosed at a later stage as opposed to, oh, and rather than the guys, the boys were getting
Yeah.
diagnosed earlier, and the girls weren't because the how it showed, how it presented. Um, so
Which is a travesty.
yes, and absolutely. So I was never the bad one in the class. I was never naughty. I was never in trouble. I was always the, he'll be okay as long as he tried harder, he concentrated harder, put the effort in. And that's where I was. And it is hard to turn things around in your head. I could never talk about it. I had other things going on as well. There's a lot of my dad's Jamaican, mum's white, mixed race. So there's a lot of, sort of racism going on back in those days at school. So that was the big contender for me then, as opposed to
Okay.
reading a book and doing my homework or anything. But there were no words. Couldn't explain up until my diagnosis. Um, it was impossible to explain to anyone RSD, being overwhelmed, all those things. The terminology wasn't there, but the understanding of what was going on wasn't there either. So I just kept it all in. But having that diagnosis and having, I guess, the knowledge now and everything's fitting together makes it easier to talk. And I don't want to stop talking. And I am still in this euphoric stage, I think, of having it's not having the diagnosis of ADHD because I don't want to have ADHD. Looking back at what it's stopped me from doing, however, it's having the answers to my struggles. That's what's given me this. I've forgiven myself for so much previously. My education, relationships, work, and all the rest. Now I don't look at that thinking, "Oh, I'm not good anymore. I'm not good anymore." You know, which is I've always been led to believe that I'm just not good enough. Now I know I've kind of shut that off, and I have to move on with who I am. I'm still learning who I am and speaking about it with my wife, my son, my family, um, my mum now. I've actually had my mum on the podcast as well a while ago. Since my diagnosis, and
That's amazing.
yeah, and doing the podcast as well. She's been listening to my podcast, and she realised through some of the things I was explaining that I went through, and now I know what it all is. She's like, yeah, I do that too, and that is me, and that's what I've been suffering, and so yeah, looking back, it's the inherited thing is there, the genetics is there, and but I don't want her to feel bad about that because it was passed down to her, and whoever was passed down there, it was passed down. You know what I mean?
It just
So
it made us that little bit more unique at the end of the day, right?
yeah,
It made us, yeah.
but my dad and mum still got on really well, brilliantly. They're still together, neurodiverse household without even really knowing about it. Me and my wife, perfect. Even with the neurodiversity, and our son is neurodiverse as well. It's with the communication you say it can help. It makes things easier. The explanations are there, and having that environment within yourself as well, because like I say, the teachers, the bosses, the managers, they need to be able to create it, but you need to be able to create it in your own mind to, I guess, accept what's going on in your head. Because I mean, there'll be a lot of people who aren't happy with the diagnosis in regards to, oh no, I can't have ADHD. I don't want that. But that's how society's pushed it. Um, and those people need to be able to get to a point where they can look, hey, it is what it is. I have ADHD. I have been diagnosed. I don't like it, but however, you know, um,
What can I do with this
Yes,
now?
what can I do? Where can it lead me? What support do I need? Um, and where are the places, the things that I don't need support? Learn about it, understand yourself more.
And if I may,
Yeah,
I think some of the points you've touched on there are so vital to being able to kind of live a life and not just
yeah,
exist,
yeah,
right? In no way at the same time, I mean, Darren saying that just because of communication, it's going to make everything easier, right? There's still going to be hurdles.
oh
There's still
yeah,
going to be
oh yeah,
complications, right? Neurodiversity in relationships is tough, right? Neurodiversity in any shape or form and that can be complex, and especially if we don't do our own learnings, our own kind of self-teaching, and that, if we aren't kind enough to ourselves to find coping mechanisms and strategies and things like that, because it can be tiring. We haven't touched on masking. We haven't gone into RSDs. We haven't gone into all the fun, side effects of depression and anxieties and, all the kind of payoffs of the level at which our minds kind of function at, whether we believe they're positive or negative, these are things for further conversations later on down the line and things so that we can definitely take a look at that. But, you know, be it far from us to just hype the positives and things and that, me and Darren, that's one of the reasons why I was really looking forward to speaking with him, is he practices a real talk, rather than a fluffy kind of, everything is sunshine and rainbows and things like that. But yeah, I guess one of the biggest things that, from having conversations like this for me is that it affords us, one, the ability to be able to forgive ourselves, you know,
yeah,
to be able to learn about ourselves, one, to be able to bridge gaps, whether that be with family, right?
yeah,
Whether that be in workplaces and things. Because, like I say, at the moment, the ownership is on us to start the conversations, right? Or at least that's my feeling of it. If we want people to understand, we need to be able to be willing to kind of show them and help them get to an understanding place in that of it. We can't just expect Joe Blogs in the streets and that to know
yeah,
if they've got no lived experience, they've got no life experience, or maybe if they've got family members with it themselves. That doesn't mean they've lived it or know what the daily, what's the word? Okay, you struggle, the daily struggle of it can be, or the daily positives of it can be, or we a lot of us struggle with kind of believing that ADHD or any of the neurodivergent kind of spectrum um, traits and things that have any positives within society and things and that. But I promise you, there's a place for all of us, right? And it might be that that very thing that you think is a negative might actually be a massive positive, but it's just the way that we've been led to believe or framed it within ourselves over years and years of narratives. So at the end of the day, maybe, from a speaking and from a sharing and things and that, it might be able to afford you the possibility of being able to go out and, hey, mom, hey, dad, just want you to know, this wasn't on you, and this is who I am. And, you guys did great, you know, so yeah, let's talk about it. Let's share about it. Or in a workplace and that, if you're sitting there and you're struggling and things and that, and whatever the accommodation might be and things, and whether you need more time on certain things, or whether you need, a different desk, or you need to be able to move around more so, or you need noise cancelling headphones. Such a simple thing and that, but it changed my work, for example, getting noise cancelling headphones and things and that. Having someone that you can approach and actually talk to about it, and them saying, not doing the usual of like, yeah, no, this is an excuse, blah, 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 or whatever, right? But actually turning around and saying, okay, cool, let's have a conversation. You're safe here. Don't worry, you know? And then having the consistent approach in a workplace of that conversation, not having to be had every other day or every other month, or if you move from role to role and things, but having a means and that to safeguard you and protect you from having to have those conversations all the time. Because I know that was something that we tried really hard to put in place and things, because in the beginning, there was no conversations around neurodiversity, and there was no conversations around kind of trauma and stuff and how it presents within workplaces and things like that. So, if you have to share the same conversation over and over and over again, and eventually you're going to feel like you mitigate yourself out of that place. So how do we as leaders, how do we as managers, and how do we ensure that our colleagues, our peers, our employees, and that are safe to be able to communicate with us, and that they know that there's substance behind that communication, and that they'll be protected going forward, and that we got their back. But you can always come and ask us. Yes, I'll make sure my links are at the bottom of the podcast. But yeah, so I just wanted to say as well, to Darren, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. And I know you probably get swarmed with people wanting to have conversations with you. A lot of my friends have been jumping on your podcast, listening to them, and they love them. They've been sharing them throughout their families and things like that.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
I'm going to sound like a bit of a dork here now and that, but I'm always really proud of someone within the community when they start to do things that would normally make them uncomfortable. So you say you're not much of a talker. I can tell you now, I've not experienced that with you in any of our conversations and that. I've always found the conversation to be really enlightening, and I've loved the journey so far getting to know you, and I look forward to what we can do together going forward.
Likewise.
And, yeah, I'm looking forward to your channel growing. So yeah, give Darren a follow.
Please
give him a
do.
like,
Please
give him
do.
a subscribe. And let's keep these conversations going, and let's see what we can all do together to drive some change around narratives.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Nathyn, for coming on. It's been wonderful speaking to you again. I think, we will do this again in the future. But everyone, please, thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe. It's been nice. It's been nice to talk yet again about something that's slightly different to what I have normally done. But this is all about learning for me as well. And I can't keep on talking about the same thing because I'm not going to learn. So to everyone out there, just be good, be kind, and remember, you are not alone. Thank you.